go by a squid called Sebastian or Squid. I was born in the US but raised in Europe, more specifically Belgium. I paint murals, I do paintings, I do tattoos. Those are my weapons of choice. If you want to tag, you need to have a short name. And so initially it was just Squid, which was my initials plus a few letters in between. But when I started to think of pursuing a career as an artist, if you believe in that career, then you have to kind of believe in fairy tales. And the squid called Sebastian kind of sounds like it could be a fairy tale or something like that. I've always drawn, so I've drawn since I could hold something. The cliche of everybody who draws, they're all like, yeah, I've drawn for my whole life, and it's the same with me. But I ran into some guys who were doing really cool stuff, and they invited me to come along, and gradually I kind of rolled into that world. And specifically since my studies were finished, I mastered in comic book design. Specifically since that finished, I started to focus more on large-scale projects that made the most sense for me, and I had the most freedom in doing that. My love for drawing definitely is very, very connected to comic books in general. Like the first 8 years I lived in the States, and then I had like American comics, but when I came to Europe, there was a whole new world that opened up for me because they're not as much distributed internationally. I do commission stuff sometimes inside, but I don't like doing it as much because you really have to finish everything like into the details, and it's like a canvas more. Yeah. But then it's a huge, huge canvas because people can walk up right close by, and I prefer to do something on a large scale that you have to see from a distance, and then it's not really relevant if you have like the tiniest details finished. As long as it works from a distance, then it's okay. Well, I mean, it is important for me to be site-specific and that it has some kind of a relevance for where you're painting, that, you know, it means something to the people there. And so this is clearly out of the Greek mythology, and that seems to be getting lost a little bit in the latest generation. So I think it was cool that I could use a more contemporary approach, still kind of have a reference to old times. We focused on Greek mythology and North mythology and a bunch of mythologies because there are a lot of lessons also that are learned through the stories that are told. And this god actually almost never really gets a central position in a storyline or in a quest or some heroic act, even though he's part of almost every story, because he in somehow crafts some object or something, and he's actually a very underrated god, I think, and he's kind of like a working class hero, you could say. I just like that because, I mean, in any time of recession, and Greece definitely had took some serious blows, manual labor is something that's very important in order to stabilize an economy and provide some source of income for the majority of the people. And so I think he's kind of a reference of that, except it's like a futuristic version. So it's kind of connected to the necessity for innovation and for changing some things in comparison to like old times and old ways. Making Thalos, which is the first robot ever produced or even conceptualized as an idea, which I thought that was really interesting because even before people had the mechanical skills and scientific know-how to produce an automated being, there was already that as a concept, even though we still can't produce them. I mean, YouTube is full of robot fails and they fall downstairs and all that kind of stuff. So it was crazy and very interesting that humans already were thinking of a helper to help us with all these tasks. And him specifically, because he was disabled and crippled, he made his own helpers. It can be a pure aesthetic one, from work from other artists, living or dead, or out of movies. There's a huge variety, but I don't like working from reference. So it's more like the concept or composition that kind of catches me, and that I want to build something in that direction. And of course, location is also something that can make it easier to narrow down the direction that you want to move in. Within murals, I think it's important to look at many other disciplines. I mean, I try to be inspired, but more on like a technical scale. Like it's always a fun moment when I see something and I just can't even think of how the hell did they even start this. I mean, there are classical artists that really inspired me from the Jugendstil period, comic book artists, muralists, tattoo artists, all kinds. I don't really discriminate when it comes to the inspiration that I look for. Well, I had a great time here. I really like the fact that the whole community is involved in it, and that you're very much so invited to engage in the community itself. And you have like one place that you can get ice cream, and then a place where you can get your coffee in the morning, and a few places for dinner. I like that you have to go through the city to get to these respective places, and you see different parts of the city, not just like the typical shopping street down the pier. I mean, you see a bit of the city and the little back streets, because that's where the character is.